In IGCSE Economics, a country's macroeconomic performance is heavily tied to its current account, the financial record of its transactions with the rest of the world. When a country spends more money importing from abroad than it earns from its exports, it runs a current account deficit. To measure this accurately, we have to look past the shipment of physical boxes. The current account is actually divided into four mandatory components: trade in goods, trade in services, primary income like investment profits, and secondary income like foreign aid or remittances. Let's apply this to a typical Cambridge calculation question. We always start by isolating the trade in goods. Here we have $20 billion in export revenue and $24 billion in import expenditure. That leaves us with a net trade in goods balance of -$4 billion. Next, we fuse that initial deficit with the net values of the remaining three components. We add the $5 billion surplus from services and subtract the $8 billion deficits from both primary and secondary income. -4 plus 5 minus 8 minus 8 gives us a total current account balance of -$15 billion. Calculating the true balance requires combining all four streams of international finance. A deficit simply means the total money flowing out of the economy exceeds the money flowing in. This leads to a frequent 4-mark Paper 2 question. Explain how a country with more imports of goods than exports can still record an overall financial surplus. To answer this, we have to look beyond visible trade. The math works out because the other three components can offset that initial loss. If a country brings in massive inflows from exporting intangible services, earning high returns on foreign investments, or receiving large remittance transfers from citizens working abroad, those revenues will outweigh the goods deficit, leaving the overall current account in a surplus. Governments often try to manage these imbalances using their foreign exchange rate. A common mistake is thinking a falling currency makes everything worse. Actually, a depreciating currency reduces the international price tag of a country's exports, while simultaneously increasing the domestic price of foreign imports. But to secure all 6 marks on an analysis question, you must state the critical condition for this to work. Export revenue will only rise and import expenditure will only fall if international consumers actually change their buying habits in response to those new prices. Manipulating the exchange rate only fixes the current account deficit if the global demand for those imports and exports is price elastic. Alternatively, a government might try to fix the deficit using domestic policy. By giving financial subsidies to local producers, the government lowers the firm's costs of production. The intended outcome is straightforward. Lower costs enable firms to lower their prices, making the country's goods highly competitive on the global market. Export volume expands, export revenue rises, and domestic consumers switch away from expensive imports toward the now cheaper local goods. Before we move to the evaluation, pause the video. Try to identify one reason why handing domestic firms free money might ultimately fail to reduce the deficit. There are 2 major risks. First, reliant domestic firms might absorb the subsidy as profit rather than lowering prices, breeding inefficiency. Second, foreign governments might view the subsidy as unfair and retaliate by imposing their own tariffs, artificially blocking the export demand regardless of how low the price drops. Subsidies create a mathematical advantage in price competitiveness, but they carry severe behavioral and geopolitical risks that can neutralize the benefits entirely. This brings us to the ultimate 8-mark evaluation question. Is a current account deficit actually harmful? The immediate answer points to yes. When import expenditure consistently outpaces export revenue, domestic income and demand actively leave the economy, forcing the country to accumulate dangerous levels of foreign debt to finance the shortfall. However, strong answers evaluate the exact composition of those imports. If a country is running a deficit because firms are importing massive amounts of raw materials and advanced capital goods, this investment increases the country's productive capacity, driving future economic growth and output. As you prepare for the exam, keep the examiner's chief warnings in mind. Distinguish between a current account deficit and a government budget deficit. Account for services and income streams alongside physical trade. And remember that a depreciating exchange rate makes your exports cheaper, not more expensive. A current account deficit is rarely a simple sign of economic failure. It is a financial reality that depends entirely on what the country is choosing to buy with its borrowed money. support that journey further, connect with Fundoo Tutor for expert one-to-one guidance tailored to your child's learning needs. Mastering these logical bridges and algebraic shortcuts is what transforms a standard exam performance into an A-star result.